I'm 16 years old, and I feel like an outsider. Now, 16 is a long time ago for me, but that feeling made an imprint. I remember it well. I had finished 9th grade. Now, 9th grade was in junior high in Springfield, Ohio, and I had felt nicely ensconced in middle school, if somebody can feel ensconced in middle school. I was involved in all the activities and had lots of friends. But then there's the big transition into high school. And to make it more intense, that summer, we moved across the state to Dublin, Ohio, a suburb of Columbus. So now I knew no one in town, and I was starting high school. And I played out all the classic scenes of being the new kid at the school. I remember the lunchroom, going through the line and then turning around and standing there with my tray, looking around, not knowing where to sit. I didn't know anyone. And then you begin to feel self-conscious. And then you feel self-conscious about feeling self-conscious. And you're holding the tray and it becomes an infinite regress. Then I feel self-conscious about feeling self-conscious that I'm self-conscious. And you just begin to deregulate. Even as I'm telling you about that memory, I can feel it. Or Spanish class. I didn't know anyone, and in Spanish class you have to talk. But my voice was changing at 16, squeaking or going deep. And so it would be like, ¿Cómo estás? Muy bien, gracias. ¿Y tú? I remember all the scenes on the baseball team. If you're the new kid, baseball teams haze you anyway. I didn't know anyone. And on the long rides on the bus to away games, I would fall asleep. And when I fall asleep sitting up, my mouth opens. And so then the team would assemble 2 or 3 seats forward. They would wad up little pieces of paper and try to shoot it into my mouth. I don't begrudge them that. That seems like a fun game to me, trying to play a little basketball on the bus like that. But I'd wake up with everyone laughing and feeling more and more self-conscious. So I made it a mission to try to become an insider. Oh, and over those next couple of years, I joined all the groups and made lots of friends. And I remember distinctly when I suddenly realized I was an insider, and it felt good. But then, even right then, it occurred to me, that is a surly distinction, that there are insiders and outsiders. I think that's one of the most fundamental divisions in our world, one of the most ornery divisions, that again and again, in context after context, we make people either feel like they're in or they're out. Okay, hold that distinction between insiders and outsiders. I'm going to go a different direction for a few minutes, but I'll be back to it. Epiphany is one of my favorite words. It's fun to say, epiphany. And it sounds like what it means. I mean, it sounds wonderful and mysterious. Epiphany. Now, in the English vernacular, we use that word to mean a sudden insight. I've had an epiphany, an insight or a revelation. And isn't it wonderful when a thought comes upon you, when you have an epiphany? And isn't there something magical about it? It almost feels like you didn't do it. We say that a thought pops into our head. It's like that. It's like it comes from an outside source, an epiphany, an idea. Maybe the brain is more a receiver than a transmitter. The ancient Greeks used to talk about muses, that writers, when you're writing a sentence, how does it just take form? It feels magical, like an epiphany. Do you know that Paul McCartney is recording a new album at 78 years old? He just says songs come to him. He just has these epiphanies. so he's still making music. Isn't that wonderful? You have epiphanies all day long as these ideas pop into your head. Now, the next meaning of epiphany is a manifestation of the divine. Well, you have that too. Do you know when you're walking in nature and you have a sense of awe and wonder? That's an epiphany. We have many epiphanies, and that's wonderful. But within the church, there is a very specific meaning for the word epiphany. It's one of the most ancient feasts or holy days in the Christian church. Epiphany refers to when the Magi came to the Christ child, the manifestation, the epiphany of the divine to the wise men. Now, in the Eastern Church, Epiphany is referring mostly to the baptism, that moment when Jesus came up out of the water and there was a voice that rang forth from heaven saying, "This is my child, my beloved. With thee I am well pleased." That moment of Epiphany. But also in the historic church, Epiphany refers to the first miracle performed by Jesus Christ at the wedding in Cana, when he turned the water into wine, an epiphany where his divinity is made known. And so in medieval art, you can see the wedding at Cana turning water into wine mixed with the baptism and with the visit of the Magi, all put together in sort of mosaics. It's wonderful. But really the most central meaning of Epiphany is that when those wise men came to the Christ child, it was the manifestation of the Christ to the Gentiles. Oh, this is the key spiritual meaning, that the Christ has come for all. See, the fundamental division at that time was between Jew and Gentile. That was a fundamental distinction. A Jew, by descent, was a child of Abraham, and thus part of a divinely chosen people. You either were Jewish or you weren't. Now, Gentile, that word means, translated from the Greek, it means mass. You're not even an individual or a person. You're just sort of an uncategorized mass, Gentiles. That was a fundamental distinction. But right here at Epiphany, the faith begins to break down that distinction. Now, it wasn't just the Jewish people that could be ethnocentric. Everybody can, all groups and cultures. But right at the heart of this moment of Epiphany is that idea that the Christ crosses all those divisions. There's no insider or outsider. Do you see? There's no fundamental breach. That dividing wall of hostility, as Ephesians puts it, is broken down. All are joined together. There's no insider or outsider. This theme is taken up in the gospel, and Jesus makes it a mission. He tries to obliterate that distinction between insiders and outsiders, that surly distinction where we separate people. He said, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. The meek shall inherit the earth. He sort of mixes it all up until there is no longer a distinction. The people that you thought were the insiders, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, become the outsiders become insiders. The distinction is blown up. And this is one of the most beautiful aspects of our faith. Because again and again, human beings, they want to create that division. Who's in? Who's out? There are about 370,000 Christian churches in America. And so, conservatively speaking, on a given Sunday, any Sunday, there are at least a couple 100,000 sermons given in America. That very thought might make you a little tired. And there is a story that I guarantee you is told somewhere every single Sunday. It's one of those old preacher chestnuts. It's told again and again because it makes a fundamentally important point. so I'll tell it again. It was during World War II, and 3 Allied soldiers fighting in France were very close friends. One of the 3 died in battle. The 2 friends didn't want to just bury him in a field, and so they found this beautiful little country church with a beautiful graveyard fenced in. And they went to the church and asked the priest if they could bury their friend in the graveyard. And the priest said, "Was your friend Roman Catholic?" And they said, "No." And the priest said, "I'm sorry, this is consecrated land. He can't be buried in the cemetery here." And so the friends chose a spot outside the fence to at least bury him close to the church. And then they left. They came back the next day to give final respects at the grave, and they couldn't find it. They knew that they had buried their friend just outside the fence. They couldn't find it, so they went into the church and asked the priest, "We can't find our friend's grave." And the priest said, "I couldn't sleep last night, seeing how much you loved him. I couldn't sleep last night, so I got up and I moved the fence." That story is told again and again because it goes right to the heart that in our faith, this is the epiphany of our faith. There is no longer to be insiders or outsiders. Human beings, we try to create that dynamic all the time, but in the beauty of the faith, everyone's in. Everyone's a child of God. Edward Markham was a poet about a century ago. He wrote a little piece of doggerel that I love. Just a little bit of verse. It goes like this: "He drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I, we had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in." This is the impulse of the faith, to keep including everyone. Carl Sandburg, that great Pulitzer Prize winning author, he was once asked in an interview, "What is the ugliest word in English?" This guy was a master with words, so this was a great question. What is the ugliest word in English? Carl Sandburg thought about it for a moment, and then he said, "Exclusive." What a great answer. We use that word in English all the time, trying to think of something positive, an exclusive club or exclusive property, exclusive opportunity. But he saw the ugliness to it. Oh, again and again, we try to create this dynamic in religions and cultures and businesses and clubs. We try to create this dynamic that you have insiders and outsiders. Human beings are social animals, and we again and again make people feel like they're not really part of it. It's a surly dynamic. And so hear the epiphany of our faith. There is always someone somewhere standing there with their lunch tray. It's our job to make them feel part of us, part of everyone. Amen.